with this case, Your Honor.
Your Honor, that trial was a mistrial and therefore this evidence is relevant to the charges he is facing currently, sir.
Ms. Pinelli, please keep your statements focused on the evidence directly relevant to the current case. Jurors, please disregard the last part about the previous shooting. I remind both parties to remain within the bounds of the case at hand. Scratch the last statement from Ms. Pinelli. Dallas, it is your turn to present your evidence.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I appreciate your patience as we've gone through the surface-level details of the case. But I need to bring something else to your attention, something that goes to the heart of what this case is really about: the prosecution's ability to prove my guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. They will tell you I had a motive, that I had a reason to kill Detective Jones. They will claim that my past with law enforcement somehow ties me to her death. But I ask you to question this. What actual, concrete motive did I have to kill her? Was it because she was a threat to me? Was she going to expose me for something? Did she have some kind of leverage over me? The prosecution has painted a story, but they've failed to give you the why. They've failed to prove that I had anything to gain by killing detectives. If I were guilty, why would I leave such a clear trail behind? Why would I not have tried harder to cover my tracks? The prosecution wants to make you believe I'm some kind of mastermind, but the truth is, I'm not stupid. If I had something to hide, I would have made sure there was no evidence, no witness, nothing to tie me to this crime. But that's not what we see here, is it? What we see are inconsistencies, contradictions, and holes in the prosecution's case. They've given you a lot of circumstantial evidence, but circumstantial evidence isn't enough to convict someone of a crime. They've got DNA, sure, but no physical marks on my body to support it. They haven't presented any evidence that I had marks. Surely, if they had that type of evidence, they would have presented it to the courts for everyone to see. They've got a fingerprint on Detective Jones's neck, but we've already established that it's not clear enough to tell when or how it was left. And then there's the witness, Opalyn, who claims she saw me dumping the body. But as I said before, how can we trust her testimony when it's based on a high-stress situation, when she wasn't even sure of all the details? Now I want to talk about something else that should give you pause: the evidence the prosecution has chosen to focus on. They've honed in on a few key things, but they've completely ignored other important details. For instance, they haven't told you that Detective Jones had been inside my house days before her death, taking evidence without a warrant. She could have easily picked up my DNA during that time, which might explain why my DNA was found under her nails. But did they look into that? No, they're too busy trying to paint me as guilty. It's entirely possible to find both the victim's and a suspect's DNA under a victim's fingernails if a struggle occurred. That's a well-established fact in forensic investigations. In cases where there's a violent altercation, DNA can be transferred through physical contact, often in places like under the nails. But I want to highlight something very important in this case. The only DNA found under Detective Jones's nails was mine, not hers. Not a mix of both of ours, just mine. Now, I'm not saying that DNA can't be transferred. I'm saying that it's highly suspicious that my DNA was the only one found in such a crucial place if I wasn't involved in the struggle. This raises a serious concern. Could my DNA have been planted? There are significant gaps in the investigation and serious questions about the integrity of the evidence collection process. The prosecution's case relies heavily on the assumption that my DNA was left during the altercation. But when you examine the circumstances, how that DNA was obtained, considering my prior interactions with law enforcement, the rushed nature of the investigation, and the questionable practices of some of the officers, it becomes clear that this could be a case of evidence being manipulated or planted to frame me. Let's also keep in mind that Detective Jones had been in my home just days before her death, collecting evidence without a search warrant. Could it be that she inadvertently or intentionally collected DNA from me during that time, which was later found under her nails? That's a very real possibility. And if we look at the chain of custody, there are serious inconsistencies that should give you cause to doubt the validity of the DNA evidence the prosecution is presenting. What I'm asking from you, the jury, is to carefully consider all of these factors. The fact that only my DNA was found under the victim's nails isn't proof of guilt. It's proof that something went wrong in the investigation and that it's possible my DNA was planted to make me look guilty. And then there's the matter of my truck. A gray truck, they said. Well, I don't drive a gray truck. My truck has a mix of colors: black, blue, and yes, different shades of gray. How many other tall men in Portofino with tattoos drive trucks like mine? How many others fit that vague description? Is it really reasonable to rely on that alone to point the finger at me? Your Honor, I would like to present evidence in my defense. The 911 call that was made shortly after Detective Jones's death. This call, I believe, is crucial to understanding the sequence of events and can provide context that the prosecution has overlooked. I request that the court allow the jury to listen to this call. It could shed light on the timeline and the circumstances surrounding Detective Jones's death, which is something the prosecution hasn't fully addressed in their case. The details of the 911 call are important. The person on the other end of the line, as you'll hear, doesn't sound like someone who is involved in a crime. They sound panicked, confused, and possibly scared. This person wasn't trying to hide anything. They were reaching out for help. By presenting this call, I hope to demonstrate that the events as they were described by the prosecution don't fully align with the actual facts. The call will give you a better understanding of the situation and the state of mind of the person involved, which was not adequately considered when they rushed to arrest me. I believe that when you hear the 911 call, it will provide additional doubt as to my involvement and show that the prosecution's case lacks the clarity they've tried to present.
Very well. Mr. Carter, I will allow the 911 call to be played for the jury, as it could provide valuable insight into the events and the state of mind of the person involved. Jurors, please pay close attention to the details of this call, as it may provide additional context regarding the case at hand.
As you just heard from the 911 call, the witness, Opalyn, did not provide a clear, solid description of the person she saw. In fact, she mentioned that she wasn't even sure about the color of the truck. She simply said, black or maybe gray. But as I've pointed out before, my truck is not just gray. It's multicolored: black, blue, and other shades. And then there's the description of the person. Opalyn said the man had tattoos, and sure, that's true for me, but how many people in Portofino are tall, have tattoos, and drive a truck that looks similar to mine? The point is, there is no specific evidence in this call linking me to the scene. There's nothing concrete here. Now look at the phrasing. She says the person was dumping a package over the rocks. How can we be sure she's talking about a body, a human life? That word, package, isn't the term someone would use if they were truly witnessing a crime in progress. It's vague, it's ambiguous. I want you to pay attention to how Opalyn's description changes throughout the call. At first, she's not sure of anything, but she's insistent that something doesn't seem right. Then she says she just has this feeling it wasn't a littering issue. But feelings aren't facts. And at no point in the call does she provide anything solid that would tie me directly to the murder of Detective Jones. The 911 call, as you heard, wasn't some slam-dunk confirmation of my involvement. It's full of uncertainty, misremembered details, and a lack of clarity. What you're hearing is not evidence that should convince you of guilt. Instead, it shows the limitations of eyewitness testimony and how unreliable a vague description can be when trying to tie someone to a crime. This is why I ask you not to rush to judgment based on this call. It doesn't prove anything about me being the one who killed Detective Jones. It merely adds to the confusion of the case. Your Honor, if I may, I would like to present a photograph of my truck to the jury. This image clearly shows the true appearance of my vehicle, multicolored with a mix of black, blue, and other hues. As I mentioned earlier, my truck is not simply gray, as the witness Opalyn described in her 911 call. I want the jury to see this photo and understand the distinction. The truck in the witness's description doesn't match the one I drive. This discrepancy is important because it shows just how vague and unreliable the witness's recollection was. I ask that the jury take a moment to examine the photo carefully and consider